also, on an international front, this year is going to be a huge year, actually much bigger than our domestic, politics. We've got, obviously, a US presidential elections. They'll be happening in November. I'm sorry, but I just sit here and go, good grief, the United States, you've got the choice of, I don't believe it. So, conceivably, if you were to be a betting man at this point in time, you'd say, well, Donald Trump will probably be the President of the United States of America by November of this year. Will he be in prison or not? Really is the second question that you ask there. One can't imagine that there's going to be any great cognitive leap from Joe Biden. And I'm just looking forward to the debates. I think the US presidential debates will be, as funny as a soap, or a horror story, or some combination thereof. It'll just be, oh my God, stuff. But also, there are other international issues on the horizon. The Ukraine war, which we'll talk about in just a second, is now in its second year. So, it's been 2 years since Russia invaded. And it has caused enormous difficulties throughout, the world, economically, politically. And then, of course, we've got China's economy in some degree of stagnancy at the moment. Japan's just stopped being the third largest economy in the world, now superseded by Germany in the last week, as its population rate declines. There's a lot happening on the international environment, and one would expect also that sometime this year there'll be a change of government in the United Kingdom as well. I can't imagine anything other than the Conservatives will be absolutely routed and put to bed. To join us to talk about all of these developments, Professor of Politics and International Affairs and Relations at Otago University, Professor Robert Patman. Robert, thank you for joining for us. Is it nice having the students back again?
Yes. Good morning, Michael. Yes, it's a nice sunny day here, and it's good to see the students coming back. It's orientation week, and next week we get down to business, so it'll be good.
What do you personally teach at the university, Robert?
I teach 3 courses a year. I teach in the first semester, or the period between late February through to early June. I teach 2 courses, a master's level course called International Politics, which encompasses the strategic dimension of international politics, often called international security. And at the first year level, so I teach at the master's level and first year level, I teach Introduction to International Relations, which is a large class. The students are young generally and very passionate about what they're doing. So that's a lot of fun as well. I also teach courses on US foreign policy, usually in the second semester, or alternatively, I teach a course on New Zealand foreign policy. So that's what I do, yeah.
I imagine in your first year you end up with a lot of very opinionated young undergraduates who have their views well settled before they even come to you and have to confront a little bit of international reality, or am I being too cynical?
No, I think that most people who've been through university realise that it's a process of personal growth, and most of the views we're exposed to come from our families and friends. When we go to university, some of the assumptions we hold are challenged by others, not least other students, and also some of the lecturers. And from that, people, I hope, can develop their intellectual independence, and therefore they have considered views rather than simply reflections of what other people think.
Yeah, because one of the things that, I'm thinking back to my own time, is that you know exactly what's going on when you're 18. Your worldview is pretty clear. And then I think the thing that I had to learn most of all as an 18-year-old first-year undergraduate at Otago University, actually, Robert, was that not everybody thinks like you. And I wasn't thinking about in New Zealand. I was thinking about, has your value structure, has your education, has your heritage, has your civilization, and I guess that's the complexity in particular that you're teaching about international relations, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, the pleasing thing for me, Michael, is that Kiwis, young Kiwis, but all Kiwis are intensely interested in what's going on in the rest of the world. And sometimes that's not always reflected in our news coverage, but it's certainly a reality. I've always struck sometimes, I'm lucky enough to get invited occasionally to speak to community groups in quite rural spots, might be Waimate or elsewhere. And there you'll encounter, farmers and other people who are very, very well informed about what's going on in the world and deeply interested in it. And there is a tendency, I think sometimes, I think it's misplaced, to think because we're a long way from everywhere else, people do not feel connected with the rest of the world and not interested in it. I don't think that's necessarily the case.
And we're great travellers too, aren't we?
Yeah.
I mean, we're a travel generation.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. And I think another thing is, with the revolution in digital technology, it means that young people in particular who've been born into this era, they really don't know, they don't see the world in such compartmentalised terms as older generations. And that's quite striking.
All right. Yes. No, and I totally endorse what you say about international relations. I'd have to say that I don't know if there'd be too many other countries. I guess it's our isolation, the fact that we don't have a lot of news ourselves. We grew up, Robert, you're not a Kiwi or you are a Kiwi?
No, I'm very much a Kiwi now, but you're quite right. I was born in the UK, and one of the first things I noticed, Michael, when I arrived in the 1990s, was that Kiwi students were much more outward-looking than their British counterparts. I was teaching at the University of Surrey, and then I was hired at Otago. And one of the first things that really struck me was in Britain, and I suspect in America, there's often the assumption that, if it's not happening in that country, it's not happening. Well, actually, I found that New Zealand students were much more interested in the outside world than some of their British counterparts.
Oh, gosh, probably since October, the 7th or the 17th. International relations has been consumed, obviously, by Palestine and Gaza, and it's being played out almost as part of the left-right culture wars throughout much of the Western world at the moment. But it is dominated media attention, which has taken away a great deal of attention from what's happening in the Ukraine at the moment. As I said in my introduction, we're almost up to, I think we're already past, aren't we? That it's a 2-year anniversary of Russia invading the Ukraine and all the international response coming there. I'm from where I'm sitting, okay, and this is from where I'm sitting. And from the media reports that I'm reading from mainstream media in the UK and in the US and Europe, I'm getting the impression that the West has lost interest in the Ukraine, that the Ukraine knows it, and that Russia just needs to grind on for another year to win this war. What do you think?
No, I don't think that's true.
Okay.
And I think there's something different happening. The United States, which has been a key partner for Ukraine, the Biden administration, even before the appalling Hamas attack on Israel on the 7th of October, terror attack, the Biden administration was encountering problems in getting its funding support for Ukraine through Congress. And that support, the complications around it, have intensified, as you pointed out, with the occurrence of the Israeli response to the terror attack of the 7th of October. Since then, American support for Ukraine has diminished dramatically. And what we've seen most recently has been the loss of Avdiivka, which is a relatively small town that the Russians and the Ukrainians have been fighting over for something like 5 months. In the end, the Ukrainians decided they'd have to withdraw. And major reason, because of shortage of ammunition and military equipment. So why is America holding back on its support? There is a powerful faction within the Republican Party, sometimes called the pro-Putin caucus, which has never been supportive of the bid of Ukraine to expel the invading Russian force, which has asserted itself. And Mr. Biden thought he had a deal with them, whereby the Republicans and MAGA people in particular would support both the effort in Ukraine and Israel in return for enhanced security along the border. But that deal fell apart. So America's support for Ukraine has diminished. What is striking is what in Europe it's increasing, and so there is a slow movement. I mean, for example, the EU has just recently given the Ukrainians 50 billion euros in support, and there are indications now that of other types of weaponry coming through from many other European states. Denmark, for example, have just donated all their existing stocks of ammunition, which is quite considerable, to Ukraine. So I think there's a recognition in Europe, particularly with the US election coming up, and you mentioned that Mr. Trump might be in the White House, there's a recognition that Europe actually have to pick up the slack in supporting Ukraine. And they certainly, in military terms, have the capability. Whether they have the political will remains to be seen. I think the death of Alexei Navalny, who died in the Arctic Circle after being detained on politically, in my judgment, politically motivated charges, probably has concentrated minds.